Online at consumerqb.com.
Hey, we greatly appreciate you hanging out with us here on the Consumer Quarterback Show. You know, it really makes our day, too, when you call in and you support our show partners. You support our expert contributors here on the Consumer Quarterback Show. We bring in great attorneys, CPAs, financial advisors, home service providers, and more here as a customer, basically as a community service, you know, to help you understand your buying decisions, make you more street smart. Reach out, 727-263-3707. You got a Pinellas number here at 727-263-3707. Reach out to the hotline online at consumerqb.com. We've got attorney Anthony Rickman coming up here in just a moment. Before we do, we're going to talk with him about the Seminole Heights killer, serial killer update. We're going to talk about J6, the Tucker Carlson drop, and maybe the Parkland shooting, if we can get to that, the death penalty in Florida coming up here on the show. But before we do, I want to give a shout out to Innovative Solar, longtime friends of the Consumer Quarterback Show. And if you're thinking about solar, you're considering it, it's a sustainable, renewable source of energy. And this is a local Tampa-based company, veteran-owned company right here in Tampa Bay, Innovative Solar. Reach out to the show hotline. We'll put you in touch online at consumerqb.com as well. Innovative Solar is who we want you to use for all things solar for your residential or commercial properties. And before we get back into this content, I want to let you know about a couple of hot listings. 2817 Gulf City Road in Ruskin. This is a hot property. It's 23 acres, opportunity to develop on the waterfront, the Little Manatee River here in Hillsborough County. 2817 Gulf City Road, Ruskin. You got 23 acres, motivated seller, great ROI. Just think about building apartments, condos, townhomes right there on that waterfront property. Put some boat docks out there, and a great opportunity here in Tampa Bay. One of our hot real estate listings from the Platinum MVP team at Keller Williams Realty. 6023 Beverly Drive in Hudson. This is another waterfront beauty. Now, this one's up in Pasco County. You got direct bay access here from Beverly Drive in Hudson. 1856 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 3 bath. Got an updated kitchen, handmade cabinetry, and all of the bathrooms have been upgraded. Beautiful property. Got a 36-jet swim spa, oversized boat lift right here in Tampa Bay. And you can see all of our real estate listings at platinummvpteam.kw.com. All right, we got attorney Anthony Rickman in the house. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. Let's jump right into the J6. Tucker Carlson drops all these videos. It's crazy. You got the rhinos coming out against him. Of course, the lefties. What was your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so in handling some of these cases myself and seeing what happened, and living it like all of us did, Tucker Carlson's expose really shed light on a full picture of what happened on January 6th.
Finally, we get a full picture.
Finally, we do. And really, in looking at what happened, there's a lot of things that we should have known, that these defendants who actually pled guilty should have known and should have been able to present throughout the course of the defense. And really, when I look at January 6th, I really break it down into 3 different types of defendants, right? Mm-hmm. There's your first type of defendant, those who are accused of sedition. Those are the ones who had the plan, who wanted to overthrow the government. The people who were, we had the Oath Keepers trial, for instance. The Proud Boys trial is coming up. The 3%ers. We had those people who really were the orchestrators, the alleged orchestrators, people who wanted to go in. People like Ray Epps who potentially helped orchestrate that.
He's an insider.
The insider. So we have the orchestrators. Then we have the people who were there. Those are the people who were there originally for a good purpose. And that seemed to be the majority of people who were there.
A tourist.
They were tourists. People supporting the president, supporting what they believed to be a stolen election.
Yep.
Who started at the rally and made their way down to the Capitol. Those people are broken down really into 2 different categories before I get to 3. The first are the people who were the seditionists. And then we had the other 2. I consider the first part the watchers or the people who followed, people who walked into the Capitol, people who didn't have intent to commit crimes, people who walked in, violated potentially federal law by entering that space, walked in, walked out, and were nonviolent. And then we have the third category, and I think everyone can agree that third category of people are the people who, even if you were pro-J6, pro-Trump, the people who acted like idiots, okay? Mm-hmm. The people who walked in and tried to fight cops, the people who walked in with weapons, people who battered police officers, and they're being treated differently. What we see here is that with the Tucker Carlson expose is the majority of people really that middle ground. Yeah. The people who walked in, the people who observed, people who may have trespassed, who violated law, but really were they just following the crowd? Were they just there to see it? Look, we saw that in some of the pictures, orderly lines through the through the rotunda.
Well, that's I think that's what a lot of people said to me too.
Yeah.
Is that if you have a police officer opening a door, is it really trespass?
Yeah, it's entering and remaining in an occupied building. So they're entering and remaining in an occupied building of government while they are in session, while Congress is in session, and they have to prove with the intent now to obstruct or oppose the administration of government.
Right.
And when you have those people entering, are they simply just there? Are they trespassing? Is it a misdemeanor? Or are they acting disorderly? And we know not everyone there has been prosecuted. We know people who breached the Capitol grounds, because technically anyone who was on the Capitol grounds, that is considered a restricted space. Once they walked past the barricades, that is actually a misdemeanor. It's a violation of the restricted space on the grounds. I don't believe there are many, if any, prosecution. Maybe a few of them. One of them sitting here in jail who's just convicted of some crimes here in Tampa.
Is that Brown?
Yeah, so Brown, we know Brown was, but is waiting trial for that. But the majority of them, the people who were just there, haven't been prosecuted, and if they have, it's a misdemeanor. The majority of the prosecutions we see are those who entered, those who were violent, and the poster children of J6 have been prosecuted. And when I say the poster children, those are the people, the Q shaman, the people who wore the costumes. The panda was just arrested. So when we see these cases and we see who's prosecuted, you can see who the government is focusing on. Those are the louder people. Those are the violent people, and those are people who made a spectacle of it. The Q shaman, the guy who's repelling man, lectern guy, the guy's walking around the lectern. They have nicknames. They're infamous for what they did, and they're being prosecuted. When you look at the Q shaman, he pled guilty. He's doing 3 years for his part in January 6th. What was he provided in discovery? We know these videos are coming out, and if he was provided these videos, which shows law enforcement escorting him through the Capitol, opening doors, I think that would have went a long way, either in one, his defense, or two, even if he does plead guilty, into his sentencing, for the judge to consider, hey, look, he wasn't, in this aspect, breaking through barricades, violent with the officers. We see the officers walking through, essentially escorting him, saying, and we saw the video with him on the floor, thanking the Capitol Police and praying for them.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's different categories.
What about Ashley Babbitt? The guy pulls the gun and shoots. She was not threatening him. Yeah, that's ridiculous to me.
And we know how that investigation went. We know the agent who shot her was cleared of charges. We know that she was unarmed. We know that she was attempting, or at least in the vicinity of a door that was being broken down. But at the end of the day, is her crime or alleged crime punishable by death? No.
Right.
And did that officer have the right to pull that trigger and shoot her? Or not just shoot her, shoot into a crowded hallway? Because look, Ashley Babbitt was killed, but that could have been any other person standing there around her. It could have been another officer.
He could have used pepper spray.
Yeah. And that was and really it was called the only shot that was fired in the Capitol was from a law enforcement officer.
Great point, Anthony. Yeah, we're talking with Anthony Rickman, attorney Anthony Rickman, criminal defense attorney here in Tampa Bay. Yeah, that's a great point you make.
Yeah, look, the only person to shoot and kill was an officer.
Yeah.
And it's sad because when we lost her life, she may have been committing a crime. She may have been doing something that she shouldn't have been doing in a place she shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
But was the force used upon her necessary, and was it reasonable?
Right. So my point with the whole thing is the overall framing of this, the J6 investigative committee, the words of using weapons. The weapons were mainly flags, patriotic Americans carrying flags, so using the pole, the flagpole supposedly as a weapon. So the way this whole thing was framed, and it was set up, and it was repeated on the, of course, the corporate-owned fake news networks. That's what really upsets me, because it wasn't that. And to try to include Trump in it, he's literally saying peacefully protest, patriotically protest.
Yeah, well, look, and I think the few who were using the flags as weapons, the few that were those people who were violent towards officers, they should be prosecuted. It doesn't matter if it's a gun, if it's a knife; those are more serious crime.
Yep.
If it's pepper spray or if it's a flagpole, those are all used as weapons against law enforcement.
Yep.
And these people are there to support law enforcement. The same people who are back in the blue are some of the same people who are fighting the blue. And I don't, I don't, those people, they should be treated differently. I think they are by the government. But to characterize this entire J6 event as a violent uprising, I think is a mischaracterization.
Right.
And I think the evidence shows that when looking at these videos. It's just like police officers. We have bad eggs. We have bad officers who do bad things, but not every cop is bad.
Oh, absolutely.
We have bad priests who do bad things. Not every priest is bad. We have bad people on J6 who did really bad and stupid things, but not everybody there is bad, evil, should be deserve to be prosecuted.
And they're being held in solitary confinement. A lot of these guys. I mean, that's abusive.
Well, we heard Trump talk about it at CPAC the other day when he came out and said, "Look, there's people, good Americans, who are being held in jail when there's a lot of people on the street right now."
Yeah.
Who've done a lot worse.
That's right.
Who are getting slaps on the wrist, out on bail, and going out and killing many more people.
Antifa, BLM, they do it all the time. They just did it in Atlanta not long ago either. Anthony, I want to keep moving here because we want to cover a lot of wood to chop here. Seminole Heights serial killer, what's the update there?
Yeah, so Seminole Heights serial killer just today actually filed a motion to suppress. And what that means is that the defense is moving to exclude certain evidence that was seized by law enforcement as a result of law enforcement's, what they claim is unlawful actions. Me as a defense attorney, one of the biggest tools I have is if you have a client who's guilty or a client who's accused of a crime, the ends has to justify the means, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes law enforcement may have a belief or have reason to believe.
A theory
that this person committed this crime, and they jump the gun and they do some act that violates their Fourth Amendment right against unlawful searches and seizures.
Got it.
We see it in DUI cases, for instance. I do a lot of DUI work. When a law enforcement officer is driving down Howard Avenue, I know I can stop any third car and get a DUI.
Right.
You still need probable cause to stop that vehicle.
Right.
I have cases of drug interdiction where they pull over a vehicle, they think somebody's carrying cocaine in the car, and they stop them for an unlawful reason just because they want to get to those drugs. And we have other cases where they committed the crime and they want to get a confession, and they use means to get a confession.
They can lie too, right?
They can. There is no constitutionally, the Supreme Court of the United States has said law enforcement can lie in an effort to get a confession.
To bait you into saying the wrong thing. Can they pull you over just for if you have one of those little outline? You know how you buy a car, they'll put that little outline thing around the tag. Yeah. Somebody said that's a violation.
Under Florida law, any obstruction to the tag that obstructs anything on the tag, you can get violated. I have my Florida State Law School block around my tag. Technically speaking, that's a violation if it blocks any of the decals.
Wow.
If you have the covers, some people like those
plastic
covers. That's a violation. So in this particular case, what the defense is saying is that Donaldson was detained without probable cause. What they're saying is that when he was detained and brought in for questioning, law enforcement did not have enough evidence to support that prolonged detention. And as a result, anything that they uncovered or discovered after that detention should be excluded from evidence.
Wow.
And why it's important in this particular case is that it applies to the testing of the firearm. It applies to if the defense is successful,
right? Then
the testing of the gun, which then linked it to the shootings, could be inadmissible in court.
Wow.
Any confession or statements he made during the interrogation could be inadmissible. While he was detained by law enforcement, they were able to get his cell phone number and get his pings from the towers. Those towers put him at the locations of the shootings at the times of the shootings, a huge piece of evidence.
Wow.
But law enforcement gained his cell phone while he was detained for several hours, while the defense says he was detained without probable cause.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, the search of the cell phone and the gathering the evidence from those towers could be suppressed.
Wow.
So, in this case, the state's going to argue. They have a lot of arguments in the counter, but this is what the defense is saying right now.
Yeah, that's unbelievable, man. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, more with attorney Anthony Rickman here on the Consumer Quarterback Show. We're going to talk about other cases, other nationally known cases, maybe some local cases here, dealing with criminal defense. So that's Anthony's expertise here in Tampa Bay. Longtime friend of the Consumer Quarterback Show. Plus, we got our feel-good story of the day. Old friends go on an adventure of a lifetime around the world in 80 days. We'll be right back. Consumer Quarterback Show, consumerqb.com.
Call Brandon today at 813-917-1894.
All right, welcome back. Brandon Rhymes here, Consumer Quarterback Show. Got a hot listing here, and then our feel-good story and more with Anthony Rickman. We got 14137 Finsbury Drive, Spring Hill, Florida. One of our hot listings from the Platinum MVP team. This property on Finsbury is almost 2747 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. Got a cozy entry room with a faux fireplace. You got granite countertops, walk-in pantry, fully enclosed lanai, his and hers walk-in closets in the master suite, massive home office, and plenty of natural lighting. Finsbury Drive, Spring Hill, one of our hot real estate listings from the Platinum MVP team. And you can see all of our listings at platinummvpteam.kw.com.
Buy dirt, Find one you can't live without.
And we got a lot of vacant land available as well, about a dozen or so vacant land parcels. Just listed 100 acres close to Disney, too, for any builder developers out there. Let us know if you'd like to talk more about that one.
Tell me something good.
All right, so a pair of 80-year-old best friends are going around the world in 80 days. Feel-good story of the day here. Sandy and Ellie met in Zambia 2 decades ago during work on the continent. Hazelip is a physician, and Hamby is a documentary photographer. Now they're on a mission to celebrate their 80th birthdays by going around the world in 80 days. Highlights from their trip so far include seeing the world from the plane above Mount Everest and putting their foot down on Antarctica. Their total itinerary is 18 countries. They've already enjoyed a sled ride pulled by a dog team, seeing the Eternal City, the Northern Lights, and a trek to see the Emperor penguins. So really cool. They've both had knee replacements, but they're getting around okay. So there you have it. Feel good story of the day. That sounds like fun, Anthony. What do you think? 80 days? Could we take 80 days off of work?
I'd take 8 days off of work.
I know, right?
Get spring breaks this week, and I'm working. A busy schedule.
I know it. It's super busy. And so let's jump right back into it. I like this stuff. Where do you want to go? You got more local stories? You want to update anything on some of the other stories we talked about, or this death penalty deal in Florida too is a big deal.
Well, death penalty is interesting, and what we see from this governor now is, especially in my world, is that he is really going after the legal system. That his agenda in this next term is to potentially revamp how not just the criminal justice system is handled, but also the civil world with massive tort reform. Mm-hmm. That's going to affect civil defense, civil attorneys, people who do personal injury.
Yeah.
What he calls the billboard lawyers, people
Right.
who have made a living dealing with auto accident cases. But in addition to that, we do see the governor now making an initiative and coming out in public talking about reforming our criminal justice system. And the question is to what extent the criminal justice system is going to be reformed and to how that is going to affect the rights of individual defendants accused of crimes. One of the things that he's talking about doing is getting rid of depositions. And for me as a criminal defense attorney, one of my tools that I have is the ability to depose a witness in a case, the ability to ask that witness questions about what happened. Just because law enforcement makes an arrest doesn't mean that it's supported by facts or evidence.
That doesn't sound like a good idea to me.
No, not at all. And, in a bill that's being proposed right now is going to limit and prohibit depositions in cases involving child abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence.
Wow.
Because they're claiming that it re-victimizes the victim. But by doing that, you're assuming that person's a real victim.
Well, you're getting them on record, though.
Without a doubt.
Then 3 months later, when you finally go to trial, they forgot what they said.
Well, not just forget what they said. In my experience, especially in the criminal defense side, I was a prosecutor beforehand. I prosecuted cases involving domestic violence, sexual assault, major cases. But not every victim is a real victim.
Right.
And unfortunately,
Right.
when somebody makes a report to law enforcement, and the case is filed by the state attorney's office, they're given protections under Marcy's law. They're given protections as what we call a victim.
Yep.
But unfortunately, in this world we live in, people lie.
Yep.
People accuse individuals falsely. The Duke Lacrosse case. You
Right.
have the Me Too era with multiple cases. I see cases all the time now where you have a divorce and you have one side against the other, and what's the best way to get custody?
Yeah.
Say the other one's a child abuser.
I had that happen to a friend.
Yeah, and now we have the sexual assault cases where you have somebody who has money, and then they want to go after him, have him arrested and charged with rape based upon money. And one of the tools we have as a defense attorney is to get the truth. And one of the ways we get the truth is doing discovery and depositions.
Right.
And this potential bill prohibits or could prohibit depositions in criminal cases where there's a victim, where there's a rape, where there's sexual assault.
I don't like that.
Not at all. And look, we're pro government, we're pro victim a lot, but not everybody's a victim. And when you talk about taking the rights away from criminal defendants and you're basing that upon a statement, a lot of times unsupported by facts or evidence, the statement of the victim alone, and then prohibiting me as a defense attorney to question you to determine the truthfulness of your statement.
Wow.
It's really hampering the rights of defendants, and it's starting to turn into an inquisition as opposed to a prosecution.
Yeah.
And it's very dangerous.
That is dangerous.
On the other end, we do have other reforms. We have the death penalty. The governor's come out and he said that he wants to seek the death penalty on cases where there is potential child molestation or sexual abuse of children. And that was outlawed by the Supreme Court years and years ago. However, this governor is saying he wants to re-examine that. One of the other things he wants to re-examine is based upon the Parkland case.
Yep.
What it takes to convict somebody and sentence them to death.
Right.
We've talked about it, right?
Yep.
Who else is more appropriate for the death penalty than a person who walks in and kills innocent children at a school with the intent to kill them.
Yeah. What was the number of kids?
I believe it was 19.
Crazy.
19 and multiple injured.
Yeah.
The death penalty was created for Nicholas Cruz. Okay?
Yeah.
But it took just one juror to say, no, we're not going to give him death, despite the fact that this family, this prosecution, everyone wanted death. And the way the death penalty is written now is that all it takes is one. You need a unanimous verdict. And that changed because back in the days, the courts had said that you need, move from plurality, which is a little more than a majority, then it moved to 10. But now the governor, with the support of many legislators, are saying we want this back to not a unanimous verdict. They want 8 out of 12 jurors to say death, and you'll get death.
That sounds about right to me. I mean, Dennis Prager was in town last night, and he's awesome. I love that guy. He's got so much wisdom. He's got more wisdom than most of the left combined when you look at that. And wisdom means biblical. These are things that do not change, right? It's not knowledge. I can go to an Ivy League school and remember facts and sets of theories and those things, and that's knowledge. That's called intellect. Wisdom is different. So in the Bible, it talks about that. It lays it out there. There's a story that he tells, a funny story where there was this ostrich that killed the father of the family. They had an ostrich farm, and it killed the father, and he had a radio caller call in, and he said, so what'd you do with the ostrich? They said, oh, well, he's still there. He said, you didn't kill the ostrich? He goes, well, what do you say when people come and tour the farm? Oh, that's the ostrich that killed my dad. Just something simple as that. I mean, if you kill, you deserve to be killed, especially if it's cold-blooded murder.
With that, and the law is in place. It's not like, hey, let's just kill this guy.
Right.
That's the law. The law in the state of Florida, and there are many states, is that if you commit a capital crime, the maximum punishment is death.
Yep.
And when you have a state like this where you have that on the books,
20 seconds back.
And it's hard to do it. It's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, it really is. Where do you want folks to find you?
You can find me at the rickmanlawfirm.com. My number is 813-999-0502. I practice in the areas of state and federal criminal defense. Anything related to criminal defense. Don't wait. If you got a law enforcement officer talking to you, if you've been pulled over, talked about the serial killer. Just because you may have done it, the state still has to prove it.
Right. Yep. Don't confess and get yourself in trouble. Call an attorney right away if you have those scenarios. All right, Anthony, thanks a lot. Appreciate
Thanks for having
me. And great show today. We had Jay Smith, A. Snoop Inspections. Thanks to our producers. And we want you to please go out there and consider committing a random act of kindness. Do something kind for one another. Be a force for good in the community. And we'll see you right here on the Consumer Quarterback Show, consumerqb.com.
You've been listening to The Consumer Quarterback, Brandon Rhymes. Whether it's real estate, consumer, or financial advice, let Brandon call your next play.